Everything clears, lock that. Now I'm kind of the odd one. I do pretty much 99% of the turning with a roughing gouge. And I've done hundreds start to finish with just this tool. When I started, it was just me in my basement. Watched a couple, well, there wasn't even YouTube. Watched a couple videos and talked to a couple people. Signed up for a class, and then the class got canceled. But I already had the stuff, so I just decided, what the heck, I'll go see what I can do and hopefully don't kill or hurt myself in the process. So, may not be the proper techniques on everything, but it works for me. So, get the face shield on. Got up about 1100. Raise it up, check to make sure it didn't move anything. Let's turn it up a little bit. There we go. Slight passes. Now where we didn't trim the bottom, it's going to start coming off and get thin and come off in little pieces. Don't let that spook you when it does it the first couple times, because it will kind of spook you a little bit, but that'll go away, and then we'll just keep going at it. Now with acrylics, you're going to want to stop the lathe every so often and clear your shavings off, so you can always keep a good eye on what's going on with your piece, because they won't always fly off completely like wood does. It'll wrap around, and the farther down you get, the more it'll wrap, and you have to stop it maybe every 15 to 20 seconds at sometimes with some types of acrylic, and clear it off. We've got it all round now. Now this is the bottom part of the pin, and I usually don't do just bushing to bushing. I'll put some type of profile in the middle, make it a little bit steeper. That's where your creativity comes into this, and you can also stop and see if you're liking a certain part of the pattern. Try to leave that part there and work around it. We're gonna keep going down till we get down to a shape we like and a size. Just remember, try to take light cuts, just like with wood, but with this it's a little more important than. Sometimes on the wood you can just dig in and hog it out. With this, it's not a good idea to try that. You're still dealing with a piece of plastic, and if you go too fast, you can catch a corner and it shatters. Stop and clean it off. See how the pattern's changing and it's getting down to something you like. Just keep going. This is a center band, so this I want to be a little more closer to the bushing, just to make it easier, a little more comfortable in your hand. Now you can see I'm getting it down there, but I'm leaving a little bit of a hump there. That's kind of the shape I like. Now we'll get down here to the nib. I'll start transitioning probably right about here and make it a little more narrow, but leave a little bigger in the middle. Your tools will cut the bushings. That's why it's sometimes good if you're making a whole bunch of one kit, buy an extra set. Bushing, so when they get too worn from hitting it with the tool or sandpaper, don't have to worry as much. And you can feel that's pretty good. You want to leave it just a little bit proud of the bushing, so that when you do sand and it takes a little off, you're not going to be too small. I'm going to start working on this side end of it. And I'll go back and forth. So when you start getting down to this point, you're going to start and stop the lathe quite often, so that you can see where your bushings are. Okay. Getting there. Just kind of nibble away at it, just kind of sneak up on it. When you're doing it on the end like this, there's technically not a grain like there is on wood, where you might catch it, snap it, but it's still possible when it does happen. So be careful going in on the ends. Taking a little play on that, I'm not sure why. I'm just going to barely touch. So No wonder it's more of a scrape. So we got a little lip here. The rest of that might be able to get with some sandpaper, which is what we'll do next. Think about when you're cutting. Think about the you're going to be holding it. This is the nib, so this is the bottom of the pin. So you're going to be holding it. You hold it down at the bottom, hold the middle, get it to a nice size and shape that's going to be comfortable for you, and where you kind of like the shape of the pattern. Now you can feel a little hump right there. So I'm going to work on that just a bit. Just take another pass or two. This thing's bouncing all over the place. Okay, I think that'll work. We'll call that one done for now. So we're ready to start the sanding. Okay, now you always want to protect your lathe bed when you're doing this as much as possible. So I always put a rag over everything I can. Now I wet sand everything on the acrylics. Start with 320 and go up to 12,000, and then we'll finish it off with a polish. So I'm going to do it. I just dip the sandpaper, keep a little tub of water beside me, and these little pipettes. We're going to turn it down at first to around 600 with the wet sandpaper. This is the 320 grit. We're just going to start and keep it wet, and that's what the pipette's for. If you wanted to go after you turn, try to finish it off with a skew, you probably eliminate a few grits, but I've done it a few times, but I'm not that comfortable with it yet, so I'm going to do it this way. I get the edge. I'm trying to stay as much off the bushings as much as possible, because you will remove the metal and it can get caught in the sandpaper and transfer it to your blank, burn it in there where it's hard to get rid of. So I try to keep it out as much as possible. Keep your sandpaper moving. And then with the rougher ones, I treat them like wood. They don't, like I said, they technically don't have a grain pattern, but I'll do it with the lathe on, and then I long sand it with the lathe off, just turn it by hand. Just slowly, just to try to minimize as many swirls as possible. Then move on to the next, which is 400. I leave the speed about the same. Keep the sandpaper wet. You can wrap it around, put some water on it, keep the water, and with each successive grit it doesn't take near as much. Give it a quick back and forth. Try to get down in the ends. Now go to 600. Turn it up a little bit. I don't know if there's a hard and fast rule to this. I just do it kind of as it feels. We're up to about 950 right now. Drip your water down in there. This will sling water, so you kind of got to be aware of what's in front or behind your lathe, wherever it's at. My father-in-law and I set up my lathe in the basement. We didn't pay attention, and it sits right in front of my electric service panel. So I had got sheets of plastic hung over it to make sure that water doesn't get in to all the circuits, to all my breakers. Okay, now I've got a gray Scotch-Brite pad. This will polish it a little bit more. This also gets down the edges if there's any hanging over, if you've got anything decorative you tried to put in there. Just gets down in there real good. Now this I usually don't stop the lathe for. Go to a white one. This is more just a check on it, make sure nothing's popped up during the sanding process that you didn't notice. It's about 1300. Now this is wet dry sanding film from an automotive shop. This one's 1200 grit. And I'll do this just the same. Not putting a lot of pressure on it. You're just, at this point we're just polishing. We're not really trying to sand or cut down, reduce size. We're just trying to polish as best we can. 1200, now we got 1500. Until these are big 6-inch discs, I just cut them down into the size I need. Make sure it stays wet. Keeps the heat down and keeps the dust down as well. Because these will burn if you get too much heat from the sanding dust. Now from here I go to the micro mesh, which is more of a polishing. I start at 2400, and all this takes is just a couple back and forths. Still keeping it wet. Make sure the edges. That was 2400, this is 3200. Just like sandpaper and every other woodworker, I use these way too long. If there's one piece of grit on it, it's still good to go. 32, now we got 3600. That's a 4000. These are ones they do now on the little 2x2 sponges, but I've had this box forever. I've still got more, so I just cut it into little strips. Probably been working on this box for 15 years or more. 6000. So 8000. And 12,000. The last one, I just go back and forth a bit. Good old rag here that's nice and soft. I'll just kind of get all the water off, clean off your bushings. And the last step is some type of a plastic polish. This is from HUD. I've had this bottle for years, but you can use anything like this, car polish. There's lots of choices. This works on any of the acrylics. It's got a fine grit in it. They say it's about a 15 to 18,000 grit equivalent. So shake it up good. Put a little bit on the rag. I've slowed the lathe down. As it gets worked in there. Try to keep off the bushings as much as possible. That's what the dark is, where it's picking up from the steel. And I am putting some pressure on this. And I usually do this twice. You can see with a good light, you can see it, the gloss on the grit change on the blank changes from when you go from the first sanding to where you're finishing up. And that's it. We're going to take this off, and at this point your blank is still fairly warm. Move back to, well, that came out. Alright. Take your bushings off. Now if your markings left, before you take that out, just get your Sharpie and remark it with your end, so you know for next time that's your bottom. You don't have to get out your calipers and measure it again. Then I usually keep a little rag right next to the lathe because you're going to get water and polish down there, and I just put it on there and twist it a little bit to clean that up. And then you can set it off to the side and we'll work on the other end of it. Okay, now we're doing the other end of the pen. And now this is going to be the top. You got to remember that your mark is in the middle, and this bushing is going to have to be turned around. I'll refer back to your instructions. Short upper barrel is going to be the wider one. So you're going to turn this bushing, we had it this way, you're going to turn it this way and put it back on here. We've got the tip in the bottom. The X marks the middle, so we're going to put it lock that down, set that good, lock it, and we're ready to go again. I'm going to bring this down just a little bit more, and I usually put a little curve on the top. Feeling pretty good, feels pretty straight and smooth. So what I do now is go in on this, the edge, and just kind of nibble away at it, just very slow, very light cuts. The hardest part of this is trying to get it so there's not that edge on the curve up on the very edge of it, trying to get this so it wraps around and get your bushing pretty close. I get as close as I can with the gouge and then finish it off with some sandpaper. But you got to go very lightly. Swing around. That's not bad. Okay, I'm going to call that good. Okay, now we're just going to go through the steps just like we did on the last one, or the first piece, I guess. Our little cleanup rag. Get the excess off there. So that way you just don't have to worry about it later on. And it's done. Set it with the other one. And we're ready to assemble. Okay, now we're ready to assemble. There's several ways you can do it. You can use a regular woodworker's vise or a blacksmith's vise. You gotta be careful. Hand clamps. You can use your lathe as a press. Something like this, it just goes in your headstock and your tailstock, and you use the power of the press just like you would using it as a drill press to press them together. My issue with these is one end always has a hole so that you can put the end of the nib in it. And if you happen to get either a cheap kit or a kit that wasn't cured properly, I've had it peel the plating off the nib, which is frustrating when you get all the way through and the last stage you ruin it. So I use this little 1-ton arbor press. For me, it just works out to be the easiest. What we're going to do is take all the parts to the pin out, lay them out on a towel or something next to you. Each part comes in its own little bag. Not sure why, but they do. So unbag everything. Lay it out according to the directions that came with the kit. Take it off just exactly. Because now in this case I've got this already put on here. So unscrew that. This is your next piece. You got it breaks it down in two pieces, but generally it already comes together. And then your coupler, your transmission for the pin will go in the middle, and your springs on there. Now it'll tell you exactly what steps to do it in. First thing you're going to do, put the nib and then I generally just get this down a little bit. Put a piece of wood on there just to protect the plating. The most important thing is make sure that it's going in straight. So you look funny doing it, but twist it, just put it down till it slides in. No, don't need to force it. And this is actually different pieces already on there. Make sure you're screwed together, and that's it. Next step, this goes in the opposite end, your barrel, and they're tapered ever so slightly, so it'll sit in there pretty much straight while you're doing that. Now each time you build the pin up though, you can't start putting it in, it starts going a little cockeyed. Stop. Oh. Stop and take it out. And one other piece of wood with. This may be the harder way to do it, but it's what works for me. Press it down till it stops right there. Okay. At this point you can put the spring in there, screw your transmission on, and you can, the cigar pin is a double twist, so you can twist it clockwise or counterclockwise and it'll come out. Next step is you're going to put the ring in the bottom piece of the top blank. That one's a little crooked, so I'm going to crouch down so I can see. That's it. Just a little bump. Alright. That's in good and straight. Next is a clip, and you can decide where to put your clip. If you've got a little scratch you want to hide, or if you've got something you want to accentuate where it goes around it, and just kind of twist it around a little bit. See where it looks good. Yeah, so it's right down in the middle of everything. Completely up to you at this point. I'm going to put it right about there just because. That gets pressed in. And then it goes together. Now there is a little pattern here, but you've missed Parts of the pattern are gone because of the curve of the blade when you cut your blank into pieces. But this goes pretty good right there, and you just kind of twist it around. You can try it. That way I think where that bubble's lining up with that, and then if you turn it around, you can go just about anywhere. Oh, slide it together, and that's it. You can put it, make a great gift for anybody, or something you can carry around in your pocket and wait for somebody to say, "Where'd you get that at?" Tell them, "Hey, I made it, I can make one for you too."